Last night in D.C., 2 Israeli citizens were murdered by a leftist who was screaming "Free Palestine." The murderer, the gunman, has been said to be a fan of Luigi Mangione, and he's posted "Death to America." So we're going to get into that. We have some information about Donald Trump's administration ending Harvard's ability to enroll international students, which I'm not sure exactly the legalities of that. I imagine that that's actually going to go to the Supreme Court, like most of the Donald Trump executive orders. Also, the FTC launched a probe of far-left group Media Matters over allegations of advisor collusion against Musk's X, which I think is a pretty good thing. There are actually free speech questions about that, but we'll get into that. There's also an order to boost nuclear power as soon as Friday from the Trump administration. And this is in conjunction with a lot of questions about, does the U.S. have the power needs to compete with China in the AI race? So we're going to talk about that. There was another jet crashed. This happened in San Diego, and unfortunately, there was someone on board that I actually knew, the drummer from The Devil Wears Prada. Lost his life. Also, a very well-known booking agent was on board. So we'll discuss that in conjunction with the possibility of these crashes being more common. So we'll talk about that. But before we get into that, why don't you head on over to castbrew.com and buy some coffee. Everybody knows that castbrew.com is the best coffee. Everybody's saying it. At least that's what I've been told. We have the K-Cups available now. You've got Ian's Graphene Dream is available in K-Cups. You've got the Appalachian Nights, which is the most popular coffee, I think, right after Ian's Graphene Dream. That's available in K-Cups. So head on over to castbrew.com and pick yourself up some coffee. Then head on over to timcast.com and become a member. You can join our Discord, and that's how you get access to the after show, where you can call in, talk to our guests. You can meet like-minded people. You can discuss similar ideas. You can watch other podcasts that are available in the Discord. You've got Roman Nation. You've got Tyler Today News. So head on over to timcast.com and join the Discord. And also go to rumble.com and become a member, and you can join the after show to watch the uncensored Rumble after show. So right now, though, I want you to smash the like button. I want you to tell all your friends about the show. And we're going to talk about all these things and more. Joining us tonight is Scott Horton.
Hey, man, how are you?
How are you, Scott? Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
I'm an anti-government type from Austin, Texas, Ron Paulian, basically. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, and I write books. My latest is Provoked, how Washington started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine. And I do a show, The Scott Horton Show, which is at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. And I'm on hiatus from X right now because I can't use it. I can only abuse it, and I have some other responsibilities I got to take care of. Some other projects I'm working on.
Didn't you start antiwar.com as well?
No,
I didn't start that.
I've been there for since 2004.
Okay, so
but I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Mary's here.
That I just can't get over it. That book looks like a dictionary. Like, how long did that take you?
It took me about 2.5 years, about 2 years. I had a couple of months I had to stop. I had a hard time figuring out what to leave out. Mm-hmm. My last book, I wanted to be like as brief as possible as of a take on each of the terror wars. But this one, I felt like the idea behind it basically is that the burden of proof is on me, really, to say. If I'm going to say everybody else is wrong for the past 40 years about everything that they did to cause a terrible problem, then I better prove it. So I did. So about a quarter of this is footnotes. It's got 7,000 citations.
Wow.
Well, apologies because I did not introduce myself. My name is Mary Morgan, and you will usually find me on Pop Culture Crisis here at Timcast. We actually had Phil on today, which makes it Thrashing Thursday.
It was. And Elad's here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Elad Eliyahu, the White House correspondent here at Timcast. Let's get into it.
All right. So, like I said in the beginning, the Post-Millennial reports D.C. Free Palestine shooting suspect charged with first-degree murder praised Luigi Mangione and posted "Death to America," says a report. Violence does not happen, but if it does, then it should, the account wrote in the past. The man accused of shooting a couple from the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. this week reportedly posted praise for Luigi Mangione and wrote "Death to America," as well as "I voted for Hamas" on social media. He has been charged with first-degree murder in the case. A criminal complaint states that Elias Rodriguez, 30, has been charged with murder of foreign officials, causing the death of a person through the use of a firearm, discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence, as well as 2 counts of first-degree murder. According to the New York Post, federal authorities are working to connect a social media account reportedly linked to Rodriguez, law enforcement sources told the outlet. Rodriguez, a socialist activist yelled "Free Palestine" as police were taking him into custody, was arriving for the killing of Yaron Lishinsky and his girlfriend Sarah Lynn Milgram. The couple was set to get engaged next week. Scott, I don't think that there is a more well-versed authority on the situation in Gaza and Palestine, Gaza than you. But I think that it sounds like, at least the way that the Post-Millennial is reporting, it sounds like this goes beyond just the situation in Gaza. But I'd like to know your thoughts with the beginning. And before we get into it, actually, I want to mention that you directed me to Ken Klippenstein's Substack post, and I think that it's worth all of our viewers reading. He posted the manifesto that Rodriguez had made, and it was dated, I think, a week or so before this happened. So it's not, it hasn't been tampered with or whatever. There's timestamp, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Okay. Well, a few things. First of all, I'm not the best, although I'm really good on it.
Okay.
My guys are the best.
Oh, you're the most humble.
I truly could not recommend more highly Dave DeCamp, especially our news director at antiwar.com, who covers this stuff in and out every day. And is the best. Kyle Anzalone as well, and the whole crew over there at antiwar.com. And there are a lot of other people who are really great on it. So I won't claim that. And then I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on what the second point I was going to make. But the third one, I'll just skip to. I'll see if I can remember that later. The main point being, first of all, it's obviously first-degree murder, premeditated assassination. So either life in prison without parole or death penalty, whatever the state, wherever that is, the jurisdiction. Oh, I guess it'd be a federal case. So,
yeah.
So death penalty's been reinstated on the federal level, right? So laters for him. I mean, yeah, it's terrible. And it should be condemned, especially by anybody who is sympathetic with the Palestinians. If the guy thought he was helping the Palestinians, obviously he might as well have been working for the Israelis as far as that goes. Something like this is the worst kind of thing somebody could do to discredit the cause that they support. But, I'm sure you're familiar with Saul Alinsky.
Yes, absolutely.
That wrote Rules for Radicals. Absolutely. And I'm not a commie, by the way. I learned this from the John Birchers, that Saul Alinsky...
Scott is very far away from communist. I'll definitely vouch for Scott on that. He's very, very far away from communist.
Thank you. But it is, I'm pretty sure it's page 74 of Rules for Radicals, because I needed the footnote. And what he says in there is, in all asymmetrical political action, the action is in the reaction of the opposition, right? So it's all about creating a conflict, heightening tensions, this kind of thing. So what he's trying to do, assuming the guy thought it through at all, what he's trying to do is get Trump to clamp down harder on pro-Palestine protesters and then get them to react harder against him, and just like trolling back and forth, right? Each other, heightening the tension and making things worse in order to try to cause the change. So that's the strategy behind, presumably if he had a strategy at all other than just angrily lashing out to murder these people. One thing is, only in the most ironic sense, you understand what I mean, that just everybody else got lucky other than this poor couple, that this guy could have set off a truck bomb and killed a bunch of innocent people. And I've been predicting this for a long time. This time it was a commie. On New Year's, it was an Army veteran convert to Islam who attacked Bourbon Street.
Yep.
Right. And now this all got obscured because there was that other veteran set off the truck bomb in Las Vegas with that weird letter to Sean Ryan and all this stuff that obscured the whole thing, what happened on Bourbon Street. And now they never released the guy's video rants. They say that he recorded himself on his drive to New Orleans from Houston. Right. They haven't released that or transcripts of that as far as I know yet. But I'm willing to go out on a limb and bet you $10 that what he was ranting about was the war in Gaza. And then what happened was, it's not even a war, the canned hunt, the slaughter of these poor people over there. And then what he did was slaughter a bunch of innocent people partying on Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve. So in other words, like, other than children, you couldn't get more innocent of civilians than just people out drinking, having a good time, doing nothing. And they got to pay the price for Israel's sins here. And the point being that not obviously, as everyone should understand, not to justify what they're doing, but to explain that's their justification. That's their rationalization. And so supporting Israel the way that we do, it is not in America's national interest. And I wish Tim was here because I'd like to remind him, as I told him before. And this is, I think, obscured by a lot of smoke and a lot of other things. But Israel and America's support for Israel is the primary reason that America's own al-Qaeda terrorist mercenaries turned on the United States of America and hit us, not just on September 11th, but all through the 1990s. Their first attack here, it was, proto-al-Qaeda, Egyptian Islamic Jihad. Their first attack here was Rabbi Kahane in New York City, and he was a radical right-wing rabbi from the Koch Party, which the Israeli Supreme Court had banned for being fascist, and they assassinated him in New York City. And it was the same crew that tried.
When was that?
In 1990.
Okay.
And he had a really good Jewish lawyer that got everything narrowed down to just this very narrow question, and the whole investigation into the rest of his co-conspirators got all trashed. And the same group went on to bomb the World Trade Center in 1993
With Ramzi Youssef?
with Ramzi Youssef. And see, the story there, if people don't know this, it's an interesting one. The FBI could have stopped it. It's a side point, but it's worth making. The FBI had an informant inside the group, and the two agents working the case were doing a good job, but their boss prevented them from following through. And he cut the guy's pay, and he demanded that he wear a wire, which was impossible. He would have got caught. So the informant, who was going to make a fake bomb, left the plot, and then they brought in Ramzi Youssef, and Youssef is the one who cooked the real bomb. And they almost succeeded in toppling one tower over into the other, which would have hit a few more too. Could have killed.
Most people don't think about it because the consequences weren't
Yeah, it
catastrophic.
was 6 people were killed, so people just blew it off. And then, of course, the ATF raided the Branch Davidians church 2 days later. And so that is what took all the attention away from the first
Was
World
it that?
Trade
I didn't
Center.
realize they were that close in time.
Yeah, it was the February the 26th and the 28th there. A Sunday morning, they raided them because they thought, well, they'll all be at church, so we'll catch them by surprise. That's what you do, when you're the ATF. Anyway, and then all through the 1990s, these are the same group who they tried to kill Americans at the Radisson Hotel in Yemen in 1992. Americans training the Saudi National Guard in 1995. The barracks, the Khobar Towers barracks, killed 19 American airmen in 1996. Then the Africa embassies in 98, the Cole in 2000, and then eventually September 11th. And this whole time, this group of guys working for bin Laden and Zawahiri, they were motivated primarily, their whole propaganda, and never mind exactly what bin Laden believed, because he's a murderer, so who cares what he says? Right, as far as you don't take his word for anything. But the point is, this is how he recruited people, is he would point at America's occupation of Saudi Arabia in order to dual contain Iraq and Iran at Israel's behest.
See, I thought...
And American support for Israel in their persecution of the Palestinians and the Lebanese. Those are the top 2 things on the list of their reasons. And these guys worked for Bill Clinton. The whole time they're bombing us, Bill Clinton's still backing them in Bosnia, in Kosovo, and Chechnya, and he thinks he's cute. 10 of the 19 hijackers had fought on America's side in Bosnia or Chechnya.
Really?
Before they turned around and hit us.
Okay,
and I'm not going truther on you. I'm saying the Americans were playing this cute game where we get to use these terrorists to kill Serbs and Russians. And don't worry, we know what we're doing. But meanwhile, the things that they were doing in the Middle East that were motivating them to turn against us were still going on.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm sorry, you were going to say about the dual containment there.
No, I just it was like I'm aware the the situation where bin Laden was saying, the major reason why one of the major reasons why he was looking to attack the U.S. Was because of the fact the U.S. built a base in Saudi Arabia, and he considered that like sullying the Holy Land because
and it's bombing Iraq from those bases
Well,
for the whole 1990s long, enforcing the no-fly zone and enforcing the blockade.
Again, this is something that my understanding was that bin Laden was PO'd, that he didn't get to bring his mujahideen in to defend the Saudis.
That's
because
right.
He wanted to get the Saudis. He was like, look, my dad. Like we're friends, we're family essentially. I just beat the Russians. Let me bring my mujahideen here. We will kick Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, and we'll make sure that the Saudi Arabian make sure that the Saudis are safe. And the Saudis said, no, we're going to go with the Americans, and he took offense to that. He was like, what the F? We're my dad
too.
Yeah, and they built a base, which is a bad thing to the Saudis.
Yeah, and you can look. There's a hilarious interview of Dick Cheney by Bill Kristol on Bill Kristol's podcast, if you can believe it. And they talk about Cheney's entire career, except they don't talk about Iraq War II at all. For some reason, they just leave that out. But anyway, when they talk about Iraq War I, Cheney explains that, never even mind the Secretary of State, he promised the king, as soon as the war is over, we'll leave. And it was on that condition that they were allowed to come in the first place. But anyway, go ahead.
It's your sense that the Saudi royal family actually wanted the U.S. would intend for the U.S. to leave? They wanted that, or do you think that the Saudi royal family was like, this is kind of convenient for us because it gave them the ability to say they had the defense that the U.S. provides, and they could say, well, the U.S. lied to us, but what are we going to do? How are we supposed to?
I think that's largely right.
Okay,
but see, so the excuse was that that George Bush Sr. had encouraged the Shiites to rise up and overthrow Saddam, and then had stabbed them in the back and let Saddam Hussein massacre them all because they were being led by people that had been Iraqis who'd been living in Iran for 20 years, by that time, 10 years, and were on their way to inherit the revolution. So he stabbed them in the back and left them high and dry and let Saddam massacre them all. Then they said, well, now we have to stay to enforce this no-fly zone and this blockade. And so that was... And then Bill Clinton continued the policy. Now, when Bill Clinton came in, he stupidly said out loud, well, I think we could maybe normalize relations with Iraq. Well, that set everybody off. And so what the Kuwaitis did was they rigged this fake plot against H.W. Bush. Everybody still believes in this, that Saddam tried to kill Bush Sr. in Kuwait with a truck bomb. But it's such a stupid lie. And Seymour Hersh debunked it in an article called Case Closed. Case Not Closed is actually what it's called. And all it was a whiskey smuggling ring that they embellished into this plot against Bush because he happened to be in town kind of thing. And then once that happened, that was like the final straw for Bill Clinton to give in to the Israeli policy. It was Yitzhak Rabin's policy that he was insisting on. And it was his agent, Martin Indyk, who actually had previously worked for Yitzhak Shamir, the Likud prime minister, who dreamt up and inaugurated the policy of what they called dual containment. And the idea was because America had just beat up Saddam Hussein so bad in Iraq War I, he's now not powerful enough to balance against Iran. So America has to stay to balance against them both.
Scott,
and that becomes then again the leading cause of these terrorists that worked for the United States then turning against us, knocking down our towers, hitting our Pentagon, and kicking off another 20 years of war.
I know.
Go ahead.
We ran through a ton.
I know, it's a lot.
There,
go ahead.
And it's really hard to absorb when you kind of just blast it out like that. So I wanted to kind of focus in on something like practical that's going on in geopolitics right now, and that's like the Iran nuclear deal that President Trump is trying to strike with Iran. So, I don't know. I want to understand the Libertarian Institute's position on the Iran nuclear deal, or what do you think America's interests are moving forward while Iran is trying to acquire a nuclear weapon?
Well, your premise is wrong there. So here's what it is. And it's a complicated subject, but I'm with it. The bottom line to start is Iran has a latent nuclear deterrent, which is essentially equal to Germany, Brazil, Japan, where they've mastered the fuel cycle. They've proven that they know how to enrich uranium. They could make a nuclear bomb, but they don't. And they're essentially announcing to the world, don't make me, and then they won't.
How long would it take them?
So that's a great question. So first of all, they mastered the fuel cycle 20 years ago. So this has been their position. They could have built atom bombs by now, but they haven't tried. So right now, they could achieve one atomic bomb of enriched uranium, in a shorter time than when the deal was still being followed, because they have built up a stockpile
should the United
of
States-
lower enriched uranium. So they could take that stockpile and enrich it higher. Before Trump tore up the deal, under the Obama deal, they exported all of their stockpile out of the country to France, and then France would turn it into fuel rods and ship it back in.
You're explaining, but I want to understand, what is the Libertarian Institute's
Well, I'm just saying, I was
position
answering her specific question there. My position is I support, and the vast majority of Americans, I think it was 68% in the poll, said they support Trump's diplomacy with Iran to make a new deal with Iran.
So if Iran tries to get nuclear weapons, how should the United States respond?
Well, to skip ahead to if it came to that, I mean, well, no, not skip ahead, because you're kind of assuming the conclusion in a way. It's like this, basically, okay? It's a Mexican-type standoff, sort of. Not like more than two people pointing guns at each other, but sort of, where they're saying, look, man, in body language, diplomatic language, they're basically saying, if you bomb us, well, then we'll have no choice but to make nukes then. So don't bomb us, and we won't make nukes.
No, it's
and
if you
America's
make nukes,
saying,
we're going to
and
bomb
America's
you.
saying, don't make nukes, and we won't bomb you. Right? So we have a perfect basis for a negotiation as things stand right now. They're not trying to make a nuclear bomb.
They're not trying to make a nuclear bomb.
No, they're not trying to make a nuclear bomb. And in fact, you can read from February the 5th, where Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, put out her threat assessment, and they just said the same thing that the government's been saying.
If they
wait, let me finish now. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, just reaffirmed what the CIA has been saying since 2007, which is they have not made the political decision to try to make nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I feel like
they
you're
do not
avoiding
have
the
a nuclear
question.
weapons program.
So if Iran decides to try to make a nuclear weapon, how should the United States respond?
Well, I'm saying there's every reason to believe they won't unless we bomb them first. Okay, so you're sort of starting from, okay, but never mind all that.
I'm going down. I mean,
Wait, is the
Well, I'm just saying,
hypothetical without a deal or after a deal?
I'm just trying to understand, if push comes to shove and there's no nuclear deal.
I'm a non-interventionist either way.
So I'm trying to understand. So if Iran decides to try to get a nuclear weapon, you think what? We should do nothing.
Yeah, the same position that Eisenhower had on the USSR.
I don't care about Eisenhower. I'm
the
asking
same
you,
position
should
that
just let
Johnson
them-
had on Mao Zedong, the craziest person, the most murderous psychopath who ever lived. Johnson said, I'm not going to attack him to prevent him from getting a nuclear
So
weapon.
you should just allow.
And, yes, so
your
yes.
position is we should just allow Iran to try get a nuclear weapon. What do you think the consequences of that in the area would be?
Well, according to Benjamin Netanyahu and Ehud
I want
Barak,
to do according to Scott Horton.
I agree with Netanyahu when he told Jeffrey Goldberg that he does not fear a first strike from Iran at all. He fears an Israeli brain drain, that talented Israelis of means would just get up, pack up, and move to Florida and feel safer there. And that would be bad for Israel, and it would give Hezbollah possibly more freedom of action in the region.
So
that was what...
It's a little bit rich because
that was
this
what
country says
Benjamin
death to
Netanyahu...
America, and you have no concerns about
That
them
was-
acquiring a nuclear weapon. And I know you could
Well,
pivot
you know
to
that Israel has a nuclear deterrent.
I'm sure,
Israel
I
has more than
understand, but
200 nuclear
I know, but
bombs.
I'm trying to go like.
So what are you
I don't
worried
think
about?
you're. I don't think you've thought this fully through. So that's why I'm asking you. What do you think the consequences would be in the Middle East? Do you think Saudi Arabia would want to try to acquire a nuclear weapon if Iran did? I'm begging the question because they've said so already. So do you have any concerns about?
That's
You know,
not
nuclear.
begging the question, but-
What?
Actually, one of the proposals right now is that they would have a joint nuclear program together.
Okay, so
Under a consortium, just
Mohammed
like we
bin
have
Salman said
multinational
that-
nuclear consortiums
Mohammed bin
in
Salman
different
said that
places
if
around the
Iran got a
world.
nuclear weapon, they would want to acquire a nuclear weapon. So I guess the bigger issue here would be nuclear proliferation across the Middle East. So I don't know. Is that a
thing
concern, or is this a pipe dream?
You
think I'm
are
just-
begging the
this is a-
question when your whole hypothetical is the day after tomorrow, the Ayatollah decides to make a nuke for no reason.
They've been saying they want to make a nuke. For
No, they
decades.
haven't.
No, they haven't been.
You're wrong about
I
that.
think you might be in a little bit of a
Anyone
bubble if you
watching
think
this,
otherwise.
just look up the threat threat assessment from February of this year by Tulsi Gabbard, and it says they have not made the political decision to attempt.
Maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but I think it's bad for a regime that says death to America to get a nuclear weapon, and to think there aren't going to be consequences of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, I think is naive and nearsighted, frankly. And again, it doesn't even sound like you have this stuff thought out, frankly.
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about it. They signed the non-proliferation treaty back in 1968.
You're so scared to say so. You think Iran should just la-di-da be able to get a nuclear
why
weapon?
won't you just let me finish?
Go ahead.
They signed the non-proliferation treaty in 1968. They mastered the fuel cycle in 2005. They have never enriched to weapons grade. They still have a safeguards agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has inspectors at all of their facilities. When they signed the 2015 deal with Obama and the rest of the Security Council, they poured concrete into their Iraq heavy water reactor. They expanded inspections even to non-nuclear military facilities and scaled back the number of centrifuges spinning at Natanz. I haven't thought this through at all. I really don't know nothing about this.
Why does Iran need a nuclear program at all is the question. Why?
Because so they can sell their oil and burn their local domestic supply of uranium that they mine domestically. They don't buy it on the international market. They have their own supply of uranium. They sell their oil for money.
Yeah.
And,
Why do they need
have a
nuclear
domestic.
program? They're an oil-rich
and as I
country.
already, the first thing I said about this was it's a latent nuclear deterrent. Wasn't that the first thing I said? Was that it's a latent nuclear deterrent? Just like Brazil has, just like
it's a
Japan
latent
has.
nuclear deterrent, but they don't have any plans.
If
to
China
get a nuclear
started threatening Japan, Japan could convert their civilian nuclear program to a military nuclear program.
They already have nuclear weapons. I mean,
All right.
I didn't say if China got nuclear weapons. I said if China started threatening Japan with them, then China knows Japan could turn around and make nukes. Right now, they don't have nukes because they've been nuked, and they've got an anti-nuke principle that they're sticking by.
Oh, there are nuclear umbrellas.
But if push comes to shove,
going on, but sure.
and that's true, they're allies with the United States. But if push comes to shove, they have demonstrated that they can make nuclear weapons. That's the exact same.
I guess my point here is that nuclear proliferation in the Middle East is bad. It's very naive.
Guys,
Why are you talking over me like this? This is ridiculous. You're just playing straight for the camera. You're not even talking to me anymore.
I'm talking to you, but you
you're not. You're talking to them.
You love to pivot to random things. Well, I'm trying to get specific, and you weasel around my question.
He's not weaseling around your questions at all.
I said they mastered the fuel cycle in 2005. They've been able to enrich uranium since then, and they've never enriched to weapons grade. They've stayed within the non-proliferation treaty. Even when Trump tore up the Obama deal, they still stayed within it. And even the deal itself, the JCPOA itself, stipulates that if America breaks the deal, Iran is allowed to stop abiding by some of its restrictions and still stay in the deal. And they are still in the deal with our allies, the British and the French, on the UN Security Council, as well as our adversaries, Russia and China. And under that old deal, by the way, it was only majority rule. It was not any country can veto like normal UNSC rules. So it was if America, Britain, and France agree about an accusation against Iran, they have to open up to inspections, whatever we want, or else the full global sanctions regime goes automatically back into place. It was a perfectly good deal. Donald Trump is clearly trying to work out a deal along those lines right now. The question is whether he's going to stick with this essentially deal-killing poison pill that says that Iran must cease all enrichment, because they're not going to cease all enrichment because, again, they need that latent deterrent.
So hold on. I want to bring this back to the U.S. and what this means for the United States, because it's my sense that this we can talk about the history in the Middle East all night, but it's my sense that the situation that happened last night with the murder of the two Israelis, what you said earlier about it being terrible for Gaza and stuff, I think that you're spot on with that. But I do feel like, as much as he says that this is about Israel and about Gaza, I do think that in the United States, there is a very strong current of socialist leftists that have nothing but disdain for the United States. And his previous comments about Luigi Mangione, I think that those are worth noting, because it did happen in the U.S.
Yep.
I think that the situation in Gaza for a lot of American leftists is just an excuse, just like you were saying that the what bin Laden does is using the situation in Gaza to recruit people. I feel like that's the situation in Gaza is done by the left does the same thing.
I agree with you.
And that's a like an overlap. But
And look,
go ahead.
yeah, no, and communists are the worst on everything. You know, we used to make fun of them because where'd the anti-war left go? It wasn't even Obama. It was once Nancy Pelosi took over the House in 2006,
Yeah.
and the anti-war left disappeared. They climbed back into power on Nancy Sheehan's back, and then they vanished. And we used to laugh. See, where'd the anti-war left go? Now we're like, oh, man, I wish they would have just stayed gone. We don't need anti-American, anti-Western communists taking our side on anything. It just looks bad. It's like when you agree with Joe Biden about bombing the poor Gazans. You're like, man, I'm getting Joe Biden all over me as well as the blood of these poor kids. You don't want that association, you know? And I wish that all of these kids would just become patriots and capitalists and then continue to protest the war. You know, remember Clean for Gene? Not this was before our time, but when Eugene McCarthy ran for president, and he was really wanted to end the war in Vietnam. And all the hippies cut their hair and shaved their beards and said, let's get clean for Gene and go out there and show these people that we're not anti-Americans, we're pro-Americans, but we're pro-peace here.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely what matters. And yes, no, communists burn everything they touch. You know, and it makes the perfect foil for the war party. That look who's on the side of peace, an assassin. You know what I mean? And then you just get to blow off everything else. But meanwhile, you know, we really should talk about what's happening in Gaza because it's an absolute horror show. Donald Trump himself said that people there are starving, and that's not an accident. There has been a full blockade. They haven't allowed any trucks in there in 11 weeks. And you can read it on antiwar.com every day. There are literally babies starving to death. And never mind a couple hundred people getting bombed to death every single day. It's like, imagine the Waco massacre over and over and over every single day for a year and a half. And people talk about sometimes on this show too about Gaza and Palestine like it's a separate sovereign nation. And this, you know, as Ben Shapiro always says, like, what would we do if Mexico attacked across the Rio Grande? But that's not right. This is an Indian reservation. The Israelis conquered it back in 1967. They de facto annexed it in 67. It's completely under their control. It's their siege. It would be like if some black gangsters in South Chicago went to North Chicago and committed some crimes, and we built a wall around South Chicago and just started bombing the ghetto and killed 50,000 people, bombing them with airstrikes over what was essentially a massive crime, a terrible crime, or even on the margin, I mean, obviously a terrorist attack too, and that wasn't the marginal part. I was going to say an act of war in a sense. But what's proportion to 1,200 dead? And as I don't know if you guys have covered this at all, but you must know. And Max Blumenthal did a fantastic documentary about this called Atrocity Inc. You guys should have him on here, man.
We've had him on.
Yeah.
We actually sat down and talked to him. Yeah.
So he did this thing, Atrocity Inc., where he showed where all of the worst atrocities from October the 7th were embellished. The beheaded babies, the baby that was cut from the pregnant woman's stomach, the baby thrown in the oven, babies hung from clothes wires. Now, why do they do that? It was already like over what, 800 civilians, and I don't know the exact number, but it was hundreds of civilians along with, well, but there were soldiers too.
Okay.
But I'm just saying some combatants, but
Sure.
which combatants were under the rules are fair game, but non-combatants are not. But I'm just saying, as horrible as it already was, why did they tell their own people, your mom wasn't just killed, she was raped to death all day?
So
why do they do that?
They
did. Wait, let me finish.
Okay.
They did it so they could justify actually cutting kids' heads off, right? They have been the ones killing babies. They have just short of 900 named babies short of their first birthday who've died in Gaza over the last year and a half, being killed over the last year and a half. That's real.
We had Max on, and we had it was back in the old studio, and I'm a little skeptical of Max, and the reason is because when we were talking,
He shows his notes in that documentary, though. He shows his work the whole time. Everyone can watch it. It's called Atrocity Inc. And he proves it. He cites Israeli media for most of it.
okay, well, his one of the things that really set me off about it was he was when he was talking about the people at the rave that was attacked, he was like, oh, and he brought up, he's like, these kids were on drugs and blah, blah. And I'm like, I mean, look, I'm in a band, and I remember what it was like hearing stories about the Bataclan and the terror attack in France. And, I knew people that knew, I didn't know anyone that was actually at the Bataclan, but I knew people that knew people. Like we had people on our
What was the context of bringing up that they were on drugs?
I don't know. That's why I was like, why?
I'd have to hear it.
And it rubbed me the wrong way.
He's a good dude. He's a leftist, but he's a good dude.
Yeah, like I said,
he's not anti-American. He is a patriot. Dude.
All right.
He's just and he's hardcore in this issue. And look, I mean, I interviewed him back, and he moved to Israel and lived there for 10 months to write his book Goliath back years ago. And he's heavily invested in this. He went during the 2014, like just at the very tail end of the 2014 campaign. He and Dan Cohen went in there, went to Gaza, and they did this incredible documentary. It's called Killing Gaza, and everybody can watch it for free online. It's Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen. And man, I'll tell you, they go around, they interview all these people, and you can call it selective editing or whatever, but like, here's two nice Jewish boys parading around the Gaza Strip, putting their microphone in all these people's faces. And everybody's talking. They sound like they could be a Texan or from wherever you're from, that you see this dirt, this is my grandfather's house, this is my land, and you can't have it, and I'll fight for it, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody says Allah says that I'm supposed to hate and kill Jews and Christians and blah, blah, blah. Nobody says that. Nobody says we hate your freedom. Everybody says we're poor, exploded victims, and all we want is justice and to be free. And watch that documentary, dude. You see the humanity in these people, dude. They're exactly like us. There's so much propaganda to try to make us hate the Palestinian people, but Hamas is not the Palestinian people. And as I guess you know, the Likud foisted Hamas on the Palestinian people in the first place, just so they could cynically say, we have no partner for peace. You don't expect us to negotiate with terrorists, do you? When, of course, they were the ones who put them in power. And you can read it in the Wall Street Journal by Andrew Higgins, and you can read it in UPI by Richard Sale, and you can read it in Robert Dreyfuss's great book Devil's Game, and in Trita Parsi's great book The Treacherous Alliance.
I'm familiar with the situation where the Likud party was looking to have. They were sending money to Hamas or whatever, so that way Hamas would stay in power, so they had basically an enemy to fight.
And they would say, this is how we prevent a Palestinian state. We keep the Palestinians divided between Fatah in the West Bank and the religious kook Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And then this is what Dov Weissglass, who was an advisor to Ariel Sharon, said. He says, now that we've withdrawn and Hamas is prominent in Gaza, now we have a no one to talk to certificate from the U.S. Congress. And it says that we have no one to talk to, sorry, and we won't have anyone to talk to until Gaza becomes Norway. See you then, shalom, he says. So, right? So in other words, they want that land. They don't want peace. They want to kill those people, drive them out of there, and steal their property. Even though God says you're not supposed to covet your neighbor's property.
Hold on a second. What were you going to say, Elad?
I was going to ask for how Israel props up Hamas. What's the specific allegation that they allowed money that Qatar was sending them through, that they didn't continue to sanction money?
Well, it depends. If you go back in history, they aided and abetted the rise of Hamas in the first place. The Shin Bet and the Mossad both working together did that in beginning, I believe, in 1988 and into... I think that's right. And into the 1990s was when they did that in the first place, was to divide and for the purpose of dividing and conquering the Palestinians. As far as Netanyahu's policy, I'm not exactly sure when the Qatari money began.
It was in the early aughts.
But there was Israeli money that was going directly to them first before they got the Qataris to do it. And then I have an article that I would recommend to you. Is called Netanyahu's Support for Hamas Backfired. And in there, I have all the sources and hyperlinks for you there for tons of sources and from mostly Israeli press and quoting Likud after Likud after Likud, parliamentarian and propagandist, explaining why this is a brilliant Machiavellian strategy to make the Europeans, the Americans, and the Tel Aviv liberals shut up about a Palestinian state. Because as long as Hamas rules the Palestinian state, we have a no one to talk to certificate, and we can say We have no partner for peace. It's always these little cliches, right? That you're supposed to be easy to memorize. We have no partner for peace. Say it with me now. We have no partner for peace. And that means we get to kill them all and steal all their property. See what a great gimmick
I'm
that
trying to
is?
understand. I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say because they allowed sanctioned money from Qatar to eventually go in that they like prop them up. I think it's stripping away.
that's what they said.
Can I please, Scott?
That's
I
what
let
they
you talk
said.
for minutes, please.
Sure, but that's what they said.
Great. So I think it's a stretch because you're really stripping the agency from the Palestinians. To think like the Palestinians don't support Hamas, I think you're kind of deluding yourself to think that like the reason that Hamas is in power is because of the Israelis. When they had their last election, Scott, please don't. When they had their last election, they elected Hamas. And I think this also speaks to some of, isn't it, Scott, right? When they had their last election, they elected Hamas?
Well, let's zoom in a little bit. In fact, what happened was George W. Bush and Condoleezza Rice forced them to hold an election was step one. Step two was that Hamas did not win a majority in a single district anywhere in Palestine, in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. They won a meager plurality in the parliament in Gaza. And then George W. Bush, Elliot Abrams, Ehud Olmert, and who is the? Oh, it's still Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. All worked together to try to do a coup to overthrow Hamas and put Fatah in power.
You don't think Hamas is popular among the Gazans?
I'm just telling you the history of what happened was that
I know, but you're beating around the point.
They won a bare plurality, not a majority in a single district anywhere. And this was in 2006.
You could say that of Likud in Israel too, by the way.
When half of the population of the Gaza Strip were under 18 and unable to vote anyway. And then
you're deluding yourself to think these people don't support Hamas, brother.
And
you're
then
really deluding yourself. Like, I don't understand. You don't think these people in Gaza support Hamas?
And then they did this failed coup.
Even in the West, they support Hamas. They're
called The
apologists for Hamas
Gaza
here in the
Bombshell. It's in Vanity Fair by David Rose, and it's about how Elliot Abrams, the neoconservative, had this great idea that what we'll do is a coup against Hamas, and we'll put Fatah in there, but it backfired, and Hamas grabbed all their guns and ran Fatah out of there. And so, no, you're telling me, you're sitting at this table telling me the people of the Gaza Strip have popular sovereignty and the rule of law, and that Hamas is the duly elected power in the Gaza Strip, which is nothing but an Israeli
I know the
prison
people
camp.
in Gaza
They're
support
nothing but
Hamas.
you know what they are?
And
They're
even
the
here,
Crips.
their supporters
You know what they
support Hamas.
They're the Aryan nations running a prison. They're the Crips running the black part of a
with
prison.
the Israelis,
They're
it's
the
damned
Latin
if you do, damned if you
kings
don't. If you
running
don't let the money
Mexican
go
part
in,
of the prison.
then they're in a
That's all they
starving.
are.
They're in a starving prison. You didn't let their money in.
Hey, Elad, we got to move on.
And then you let their money in. Oh, you're supporting and propping up Hamas.
I said we got to move on.
Could always.
So listen, we're going to jump to this story. We're going to jump to some domestic stories here. The Trump administration is ending Harvard's ability to enroll international students. The BBC is reporting. The Trump administration has moved to end Harvard's ability to enroll international students, escalating a standoff with America's oldest university. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem wrote on X that the administration had revoked Harvard's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification as a result of their failure to adhere to the law. Let this serve as a warning to all universities and academic institutions across the country, she wrote on Thursday. Harvard called the move unlawful in a statement. We are fully committed to maintaining Harvard's ability to host our international students and scholars who hail from more than 140 countries and enrich the university and this nation immeasurably, the university responded. We are working quickly to provide guidance and support to members of our community. This retaliatory action threatens serious harm to the Harvard community and our country and undermines Harvard's academic and research mission. The Trump administration's decision could affect thousands of international students who study at the university. Over 6,700 international students were enrolled at the institution last academic year, university data shows, making up to 27% of its student body. We're seeing a lot of confusion on this, Sarah Davis. An Australian student received after receiving a graduate degree, told BBC NewsHour. Now, I'm not 100% sure of the context of this, but I believe it's because of the failure to protect Jewish students. Is that the argument
that's
here?
That's the excuse, I guess.
That's the excuse?
I mean, and this goes to, in fact, back to our original point about this assassination. Trump tweeted out, this assassination was obviously caused by anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
I mean, would you buy it if anybody said that the reason you hate Trump is you just hate Dutch people?
Well,
Right?
I mean,
This is
it's
not what's going on here, that we have a rise in anti-Jewishness around the country. People are upset over what's happening to the Palestinians at the hands of Israeli fighter bombers.
Like I said, I think
Right?
that I
Come
really,
on.
I legitimately think that is like we were discussing earlier. That's an excuse. I think that there's a lot of people that because they use Gaza as an excuse, but Gaza is only in the past couple of years, and this sentiment about this anti-American sentiment, this has been going on since the George Floyd, definitely since the George Floyd riots.
Look,
Because
if what you're saying is leftists need to protest something at all times, and this is something, and so they're protesting it, that's true. But that doesn't mean that it's all very disingenuous. In fact, look at how many Jewish students are leading these protests and participating in these protests.
yeah, but it's the point of the, like you said, I do think like the leftist, it's the leftists that are dissatisfied with their own lives. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of it is luxury beliefs, right? Like
Maybe,
the people that are upset about these situations, a lot of times they don't know what's going on in
But they're
Gaza.
college kids, right? That other people don't protest anyway. There are plenty of people who are sick and tired of this, including like half of Republicans are sick and tired of this and wanted a ceasefire a year ago. They don't go out and protest with signs and chant.
No, that's just not
only with
Republican.
American flags instead, right? Like they just don't protest at
That's just
all.
not
That's just
American.
not how
Yeah,
they
the
do it. So yeah,
conservatives.
protesting is a thing that young leftists do. But there was this piece in the New York Times, I guess 2 days ago now, about how the Heritage Foundation had this huge plan. Well, the New York Times made it coincide with the 2025 thing. I don't know if that was part of it or not, but it was, I think, a separate thing at Heritage. But the whole thing was a multi-pronged attack on all opposition to Israeli foreign policy in America, and the whole idea is just to smear everyone as anti-Semites and Hamas supporters.
Well, I mean, that's clearly not working.
And then what? Well, I mean, they're trying. No, I mean, it is working. And that's, I think, part of what this is about is whatever degree the national government has, or at least the executive branch has over the universities, they're doing everything they can to get the universities to stop all these protests and intervene. And it's just the start, But
I feel
the
like
thing is, why should we have to give up any freedom whatsoever over another country's foreign policy?
Well,
It's
I mean, we
completely
don't
crazy.
have to give up any freedom. This is specifically about foreign students, so that's not really.
Are the existing foreign
Well, but they're
students getting
legal
deported?
here, right? I mean, they're not like illegal immigrants. They're here. They're abiding the rules. Now, we got to change the rules if they cross the line and criticize Israel, right?
don't
Sounds like
think-
the existing foreign students get to stay, right?
Yeah, I don't think that it's about existing students. I think that it's only
just
for
new admissions.
For new admissions, yeah.
Well, this is just about, it's just sticking it to Harvard in this way as punishment for the
Yeah,
previous
and
stuff,
Harvard
right?
and Harvard, look, there's a lot of things that Harvard's done that the right more broadly has an issue with the DEI stuff, the fact that they're not admitting students that have higher scores because of their race. These kind of things have to stop. And I think that this particular issue, whereas this one, maybe there are people that are going to make an excuse and say that it was about Gaza. This is more about Harvard beefing with the administration and beefing with the people that are trying to undo what is basically ingrained in Harvard nowadays, which is the whole DEI leftist perspective. And when the administration tries to force them to unravel this stuff, this is the pushback that Harvard is going to go. They're going to say, "Oh, well, look, it's about they're messing with our liberty to do this and blah blah blah." But I do think that this is more about trying to undo decades of leftist infiltration into the administration or into
I find that hard to believe because there was no impetus in the first Trump administration to defund Harvard or slap them with these, new rules because anti-white indoctrination was obviously already prominent in every Ivy League, every school.
I don't think that it was
there was
as
zero
obvious.
impetus to implement anything like this before.
I disagree with the idea that it was obvious, and the reason is because I think that most of your normies didn't know about it until the Black Lives Matter riots. Most of your average people, they weren't cognizant of it until it was put right in front of their face with the slogans and the things that were being said during 2020 and the Summer of Love, and when people saw that on display like that. Then people were like, wait a minute, this is actually going on. Because everyone
The
went...
explanation that they're giving
went-
for this has nothing to do with that.
for the explanation that they're giving for why the kids are, why they're not taking the administration.
From the explanation that you read, there's no mention of DEI or critical theory or leftist indoctrination in higher education.
No, that like Tim was, or I mean, like Scott was saying, the argument that's being made is, oh, it's anti-Semitism, et cetera. But the ingrained opinions of the schools this is all about the fight between the administration and Trump. The Trump administration, the attempts of the administration to undo what's been done.
And again, where they're raping and torturing the term anti-Semitism to mean opposition to Israel killing little kids all day with our money, with our planes, our bombs, our diplomatic support, and with future dead Americans from terrorist attacks as the result. That's not anti-Semitism.
No,
that's the last refuge of a scoundrel is what it is.
I'm on record saying that calling these things, blaming anti-Semitism or using anti-Semitism as an excuse to do things like cracking down on what is ostensibly freedom of speech, that's a bad move in my opinion. If you're going to send away people that are here on visas because they're critical of the West, America, and Israel, don't even bring up Israel. Just the fact that they're critical of the United States is, in my opinion, enough to pull their visa.
Well, what if all they're saying is America shouldn't be supporting Israel?
They're not just saying that, though. I mean, even this guy that shot the two Israelis last night, he has all kinds of stuff where he's like, death to America, blah, 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 blah,
There
blah.
was the lady who had just co-authored a letter, right?
Sure.
And they're kicking her out of the country. And
yes.
That was all she was saying is America shouldn't be supporting what Israel is doing.
I mean, maybe that's all that she was saying. And maybe in that specific case, then fine. Then I would say, okay, maybe she shouldn't be sent away. But if you're on record having anti-American views, if you're a communist and you come to the US,
anti-American is a pretty broad term too, man.
If you're a communist,
okay, if you're a communist, well, hell,
because we won't let people into the country that are communists. If you're an avowed communist, the United States can say, no, we're not going to give. In fact, it's policy to say, no, we're not giving you a green card. So if you come to the United States, you don't mention that you're a commie, and then you go ahead and start doing things with DSA or whatever leftist organizations, I think it's perfectly legitimate for the government to say, we're taking away your green card and sending you home. Now, I don't think that they should be saying it's because of anti-Semitism, because that brings into question things that normal Americans don't have any stake in, right? Like, you can dislike
shouldn't be searching for a pretext either. If that's what it's really about is protecting Israel, because that is what is going on here.
I disagree with that, but I understand what you're saying.
You're saying the leftists are going to protest no matter what. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is the crackdown is because they're protesting Israel. If they're just protesting, carbon emissions or whatever, we would not have this kind of censorship.
So I'm saying the crackdown should come, but it shouldn't come because of Israel. It should come because they're anti-American.
I'm saying, but that is why this crackdown is coming.
Well, I mean,
because of a foreign country.
Well, yeah, and look, it shouldn't be. It should be just because they're anti-American.
During the Iraq War, it was foreigners and Jews were the ones most likely to oppose the war. Mm-hmm. And even though the neoconservatives were doing it for Israel, most American Jews were liberals and opposed W. Bush on the thing. But most American, foreign-born American citizens, or either naturalized or legal permanent residents or whatever, they opposed the war.
Yeah.
Well, all the native-born guys were like, yeah, we got to stop Saddam from giving nukes to Osama, because that's what George Bush said.
And to that,
and they were, boy, were they wrong. They should have listened to all those terrible anti-American immigrants who knew better than them.
To your point, the immigrants that are actually American citizens, if they've been naturalized or whatever, that's fine. But if you're not a citizen, there are different standards, just to be clear. Yeah. So because you mentioned,
well, and I don't know the law on green cards and visas and whatever.
Well, if you're here on a student visa, if you're not a citizen, if you're a naturalized citizen, you're a citizen. Say whatever you want. If you're a guest, you shouldn't be able to say things. They shouldn't put up with it.
Freedom of speech on everything is more important. You've never lost an argument to a communist in your life, dude. Why would we worry about that? This is America. The communists are no threat to this country. If anything, they bring in some good skepticism on some foreign policy issues. What else are they good for? I'm not sure. But what are they really dangerous? What, they're going to seize control of our agriculture policy and make it worse than it already is?
So I think that a lot of the left-leaning stuff, like the LGBT stuff, that's all involved. That's all communist. that's pushed by communists.
Well, we need total separation of school and state there.
Yeah,
I'm
I
for
agree about
abolishing all government subsidization, control of any school on any level.
Yeah.
So as just the Jewish affairs correspondent, in addition to being the White House correspondent here at Timcast, I wanted to get a tidbit in on anti-Semitism. I know not everybody in the chat loves hearing about it, but I think it's an opportune time to talk about it. Over the course of my lifetime, attitudes towards Jewish people in this country have become more skewed and more dangerous, frankly. When I grew up going to temple, there weren't security guards there, but now when I go to temple, there's always multiple security guards, and that's almost every synagogue across the country, because there have been shootings at synagogues and whatnot, and then Jewish kids go to different college campuses, and their aggressive chants about euphemisms towards violence towards Jews at these college campuses, where they're getting mocked, where they're saying things like globalize the Intifada, and which I believe is a call for violence against Jews. And I believe what we saw last night in Washington, D.C., was an anti-Semitic attack, and it's what globalizing the so-called Intifada looks like. I cover a lot of anti-Israel and what I think are anti-American protests, and they chant this all the time. And I think a lot of them know what they're saying, although many Islamists and far leftists will cover for that. So I think that's what we should consider. And also, why should you care? As MAGA people, as Trump supporters, I think it's important to talk about why you guys should care. And I think it's important to talk about why is this important? It's because in our country right now, among the far left, Israel is right-wing and white-coded. When the far left talks about this issue, they unperson Zionists as being Nazi white supremacists, and therefore doing anything to a so-called Zionist is justified. And many people on the far left, they're happy about civilians dying. They're proud of it, and they're proud of all of their terrorists. They say we won't condemn any of our martyrs. So I don't think we should be confused about what these people's goals are. They think all settlers deserve to be killed, frankly. And, once they're done calling all the Zionists Nazis, don't worry, they also call the MAGA people Zionists. And they will also justify violence against you guys, like many of the people online in the far left are justifying violence against so-called settlers or so-called Zionists or so-called whatever have you. They're unpersoning these people, and eventually it will also go to the MAGA people. MAGA people have been called Nazis for some time. I'm just very thankful that the Trump administration is more clear-eyed on this than maybe communists or libertarians who tend to work together at many of these marches, because I know we hate.
Well, look, I agree with some of what you say there. I've met leftists who also, define
leftists have influenced
enemy way too broadly.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, the only legitimate target for violence is somebody who's armed. And, when you're talking about political violence like this, organized groups of armed men, they're all wearing black hats or at least some dark shade of gray. The only innocent people are the civilians. The white hats are the civilians. It's always wrong to kill civilians. And it's almost always stupid, even if you don't have any morality. It's almost always completely idiotic for whatever cause that you're supporting. Like Israel, killing so many innocent civilians in Gaza right now is what has turned so many people against Israel, and in some cases on the margin, quite unfortunately, against Jews, broadly speaking, which is completely wrong and stupid. Yeah. But a lot of people are stupid. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard as a libertarian, I'm an individualist, so I'm always permanently inoculated, to coin a phrase, sorry guys, against collectivist identification, certainly dehumanization of any group, because I don't even believe in groups. There are no groups. There's just individuals. We're born one at a time, and we got a right to live one at a time, and it's always wrong. This guy's crazy. And look, I've been in an argument recently with people who just say, no, if anyone even is living in Israel, never even mind like a settler on the West Bank on obviously like what is currently trespassing on Palestinian land, but even people living in so-called Israel proper, that it's all illegal trespassing and settlement, and those people are fair game. And I got in a big argument about that with some people actually recently, because it's a pretty obvious sliding scale from white to black about who's a legitimate target and who is not a legitimate target. In fact, if you look, and this was part of my argument, was look at how absolutely idiotic and horrible what Hamas did on October 7th was for their own cause. You got a huge cottage industry of people who think that Israel deliberately let it happen just because it served the Palestinians' cause so horribly that they thought that Netanyahu must have let it happen on purpose just so he could get away with doing what he's doing. That is how horrible the reaction is from Hamas going outside and killing civilians. But just think of the counterfactual. What if, and Hamas is not quite Al-Qaeda. You know, they've killed Al-Qaeda guys before. They're like a clique to the one clique more civilized than the bin Ladenites. They could have, and they have tight operational control of their armed forces too. They could have sealed the fence behind them and made sure no strangers are coming, only their guys. And they could have driven right past that rave.
Yep.
They could have stopped and danced and then moved right on. They could have driven right past the kibbutzes and then gone straight to the military base and fought, grabbed some captives and done their thing. And then, you know, they probably wouldn't have gotten any credit for that, but they certainly would have not gotten the reaction that they got for killing innocent women and children in that thing, and just absolutely destroying their own credibility and
we're going to
nth degree.
We're going to jump to this story. The FTC has launched a probe of far-left group Media Matters over allegations of advertiser collusion against Musk's X. The FTC has reportedly launched an investigation into the far-left advocacy group Media Matters for America over its activism targeted tech billionaire Elon Musk's X. The New York Times reported Wednesday that the FTC had sent a letter to Media Matters inquiring about whether it had illegally colluded with advertisers in order to harm Musk's social media platform. Media Matters for America did not immediately respond to Fox News Digital's request for comment. A spokesperson for the FTC declined to comment. In 2023, major advertisers, including IBM, Apple, Disney, Lionsgate, and Paramount, fled X after Media Matters published a report alleging their ads were appearing alongside anti-Semitic content. However, Musk filed a lawsuit against the liberal group alleging it completely misrepresented the real user experience in order to mislead advertisers and manipulated the algorithms that curate users' feeds to get racist, incendiary content to appear next to large advertisers' paid posts. Attorneys representing X said the report was intentionally deceptive and caused financial harm. If you were a user of X at the time, so this is in 2023, so this is just say 2.5 years ago or so, I didn't see any kind of advertisements alongside anti-Semitic material. In fact, at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of anti-Semitic material on X, to be honest with you, because they were still kind of in the habit. Well, maybe word hadn't really gotten out about how the policies at X were, because they weren't kicking people off a lot. And to be honest with you, I think that a lot of the anti-Semitism that you see nowadays is, like we've been saying, is in response to the October 7th attacks.
Yeah, and the aftermath of that.
Sure.
Yeah, the consequence of that. And, you know, I don't know exactly how this works, but, you know, I think they probably already had, like, even before he bought it, the algorithms were already set where things that have, like, you know, the kind of offensive speech that a bot can recognize, it's going to keep that away from their major advertiser anyway, right? They wanted to have it like that. Because I can't recall ever seeing, you know, I can recall seeing a lot of mean-spirited things on X, but I can't ever recall seeing them just adjacent to an IBM ad. Yep. You know what I mean? I don't think that was ever really a thing. I hope he kicks their ass. I hate Media Matters.
They're garbage.
That guy, they're the worst, dude.
And I mean,
that Brock, what's his name? I forgot his first name.
I don't know. They've got
used to be a right-wing hatchet man, and then he turned into like in the 1990s. He was one of these guys always flinging like the flimsiest kind of accusations at Bill Clinton.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like getting in my way when I'm trying to really get at the guy. And then he turned into this ridiculous like Hillaryite hack, of the worst order.
We've got a piece of media here from Laura Ingraham. So let's.
All right, joining me now is former Trump acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. Matt, you called this lawsuit revolutionary. Now, aside from its relative novelty, does it have a chance?
Yeah, and it does, and it's good to be with you, Laura. And here's, my analysis as I looked at this complaint. First of all, Media Matters just manufactured this evidence. They created a way that only their unique account would be served these couple ads, and then they suggested that this is par for the course. And we know, based on everyone on the X platform knows that this is not par for the course. But what is so important is that Elon Musk and X are going to court, and they're going to make these people defend fund their actions and their activities. And I think that, to me, is the most important thing, because for so long, conservatives have been deplatformed, demonetized, and otherwise assaulted by these left-wing groups and the mainstream media that gives them, oxygen. And no one has been willing to go to court and actually pursue their rights. And so I think this is a big deal for someone to invest money in the court and in lawyers to actually go after groups like Media Matters.
Well, you never see Media Matters upset that there are people posting on these social media platforms that call themselves minor attracted persons, right? They're attracted to minors. Oh, they're not pedophiles, but they're attracted to minors. I mean, so they don't have any problem. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
All right, enough, Laura. Yeah, I mean,
without going on that tangent about liberals and their euphemisms, wasn't there a story? Wasn't there a story that was like kind of adjacent to the Twitter files that was about this consortium of advertisers?
Yeah.
They kind of had the ads that would be embedded on all different kinds of websites. And then they had this blacklist that was going around of, I think it was people who were good on Russiagate and or good on COVID were getting blacklisted in this way. And I guess I just wonder whether anybody's suing over that. I mean, Elon Musk has the lawyers, but what about because what it was like, the blacklist was making it where it was really precluding new people too. Like if you're not grandfathered in, kind of, they could just exclude everybody from all this web ad revenue and give a leg up to all the people they wanted to support.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really weird time. There's always been some kind of collusion between, or at least in the past 10 years, for the majority of it, for the better part of the past 10 years, there was some kind of collusion between the estate or the government and what was being put onto these websites. But this particular issue where it's Media Matters colluding with, well, essentially trying to do what they can to basically produce a scandal to try and harm X monetarily. Like that's something that obviously I don't put it past Media Matters. That's something that fits right in their kind of smear merchant wheelhouse. But I don't know that this is actually going to produce the kind of results that I'm hoping for. I mean, I would love to see Media Matters, be put out of business. But I don't know that even Elon Musk is going to be able to produce that kind of result. What do you have any thoughts on this, Mary?
Oh, it just reminds me of the YouTube adpocalypse, which was like ancient history now in internet years. But that was it started in late 2016, and then there was a second wave of ad boycotts in early 2017, and I forgot what prompted it. It says that it was PewDiePie's fault. that he was making.
Was it the bridge incident?
It was not the bridge incident. It was the bridge?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't the bridge incident in and of itself, because it says this was in February 2017. PewDiePie was under fire for posting videos that YouTube deemed anti-Semitic and hate speech, including jokes about Adolf Hitler and other things that I can't say out loud. Another example that I cannot say out loud on YouTube. And that led to the UK government, Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, Johnson & Johnson, and many other major brands pulling or pausing their advertisements on YouTube. So as a result, YouTube freaked out, and that's when they started cracking down on all content that was even geared toward an adult audience, let alone violating any community guidelines. So you couldn't even make controversial content at that point, which I was watching right-wing or right-leaning or even libertarian YouTubers at the time who were getting their channels completely demonetized.
A lot of
and
gun
then
tubers
it affected everyone else as well, like apolitical entertainers. Had their ad revenue docked in a major way, and it was no longer able to be a source for their livelihood.
They got a hell of a monopoly with that YouTube. Maybe.
Yeah.
They really do.
That's why platforms like Rumble are so important. So you should become a member of the Rumble, and so you can
I
join
saw
us for the
one
after
on
show.
YouTube where, and you could have written like a short story about this or something. The guy's a real history professor from the University of Science or whatever the thing, and he's telling a story about how Hitler censored the book All Quiet on the Western Front. And he in the thing, I don't know what's going to happen to this YouTube later for me saying this. In this thing, you could tell he's completely exasperated. He goes, "This is the 6th time I've uploaded this video." Okay, so here's what happened: the bad mustache man took over the Yahtzee party, and then he went and he did the bad thing to certain individuals of Jewish descent, and he's just has to jump through these insane. And it's like, what algorithm is inventing this newspeak that we all have to? Oh, the mean mustache man, he unalived many people and it's like, dude, you can't be a historian from a professor at a university and talk about Hitler censoring a book, an anti-war book.
I'm not going to get
in the world.
I'm not going to get specific.
The algorithm says so, right?
Yeah, right?
There's no person in charge. It's a bot that gets to decide.
I mean, at the time when this censorship kind of was becoming something that these corporations wanted to do, AI is still very new. And so these algorithms, they're not, and I don't even think that an algorithm could properly do it now. It would get a lot of things that aren't necessary to be censored anyways. But 10 years ago when the adpocalypse happened, they were just babies. This technology was new, and so like they were getting all kinds of erroneous hits and stuff. But even still, like last night, there was a piece of news that came out that I'm not going to get into it, but it was regarding a Senate hearing about COVID and some of the vaccinations, and we couldn't talk about it because what the actual news was still might be something that would flag us here on YouTube because YouTube still is very finicky about what you're allowed to and not say.
And how do you even test it and know what the lines are? They never even say what the lines are.
Yeah, they don't.
Right after the war, the Russia-Ukraine war started in 22, there was a email that went out from Google that said, "You better watch out. We're going to demonetize anyone who says anything that implies that, whatever, the way that they phrased it, that Ukraine in any way had anything to do with why Russia would have invaded them, and we'll kick your ass," right? And like Google they're the kings of the world, right? They run the world. If Google can censor you, you're done.
Yeah. But in this context, I do think that it's worth the lawsuit because of the collusion, not collusion, but the efforts of Media Matter, because it was totally politically motivated, right? Like Elon Musk bought X, Media Matters, because they're far leftists. They're about as far left as you can get and still be considered mainstream, I think is probably a fair way to say it.
Okay.
They're without becoming, tankies. Yeah. I'm sure that they have people that work there that are far enough left that are like, well, it's okay, the stuff that Luigi Mangione does, considering people like Taylor Lorenz say that, and like she's made those kind of remarks. And so, if Taylor Lorenz makes that remarks, I'm sure there are people there that would agree with her. But overall, the organization as a whole is probably as far left as you can get without, falling into the bin of crazy.
Although with their one and only mission being defend the Democratic Party and its power. I mean, that's what they're really about. They're not ideology first. They are servants of the Democratic Party. That is their one and only mission.
All right. Well, okay. So take that for what it's worth. But the fact that they were, working against Elon Musk specifically because he didn't parrot their preferred politics, and even
they have to cheat. Remember how Twitter was before Elon Musk?
Absolutely.
God, I just kind of block it out, like trauma based, like don't want to think about it. Man, it was horrible.
Yeah,
it was horrible.
It was really rough.
And they knew how bad it was that they were losing it. They knew what a hit that was going to be.
And but that was not just because of they're losing the ability to control what people are saying, but the ability to build narratives. They could use X and people on X to repost and retweet and make one piece of media seem like it had all kinds of reach that organically it didn't.
You ever read John Robb? He He writes Global Gorillas is his
I think I
Substack.
follow him.
Yeah, he's a good dude. His expertise, he started out tracking jihadis in Iraq War II.
Okay.
And then so he became like an expert on link analysis and network
Yeah,
swarms and all that stuff.
ROBB, right?
Yeah.
The Global Guerrillas Report. Yeah, I follow him.
And so he has brilliant stuff, and it's all about
Right, yeah.
it's all about the network swarms online
Mm-hmm.
and how they're formed and how they work and how old liberal Twitter swarm used to work and how it's changed under Elon Musk and all kinds of stuff. He's got all kinds of insightful stuff. His one today is about how the Israelis just can't seem to get their act together when it comes to their messaging. They're being absolutely demolished in the battle of public opinion. It's mostly because they're in the wrong, but it's also because their arguments suck. So, and they can't adapt to the new form of propaganda. Is basically what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to speak to that, but
He's a really bright guy.
I
You'll
do
like
follow
him.
John, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I like the stuff that he talks about. But I think we're going to move on to, let's see, what do we got? This particular, I think this is actually really important. We were posting this. There's a Reuters report. Trump to sign orders to boost nuclear power as soon as Friday, sources say. Reuters reports U.S. President Donald Trump will sign executive orders as soon as Friday that aim to jumpstart the nuclear energy industry by easing the regulatory process on approvals for new reactors and strengthening fuel supply chains, four sources familiar said. Facing the first rise in power demand in 2 decades from the boom of artificial intelligence, Trump declared an energy emergency on his first day in office. Chris Wright, the energy secretary, said that the race to develop power sources and data centers needed for AI's Manhattan Project 2, referring to the massive U.S. program during World War II to develop atomic bombs. A draft summary of the order said Trump will invoke the Cold War-era Defense Production Act to declare a national emergency over U.S. dependence on Russia and China for enriched uranium, nuclear fuel processing, and advanced reactor inputs. The summary also directs agencies to permit and site new nuclear facilities and directs the Departments of Energy and Defense to identify federal lands and facilities for nuclear deployment and to streamline processes to get them built. Now, people might not be aware of this, but the amount of energy that China produces nowadays is almost, or like it's significantly more than the U.S. And they're using a holistic approach. So they're using coal-fired plants. They just built the Three Gorges Dam. They have plans for an even bigger dam that is reported to be able to power like an area the size of Germany, with a population of Germany. Wow. They've increased nuclear power, so they're really taking the power consumption demands of AI very seriously. And if you listen to tech bros in Silicon Valley, one of the things that they say is if we don't get, or that they talk about regularly, if we don't get our ability to produce power up to snuff fast, then there's no way we're going to be able to compete with, not even win, but compete with China because all AI is so power intensive. Like it takes a lot of juice to run these GPUs. X or
To what end, though?
Well, I don't know a whole bunch about AI and stuff, but if it is the technology of the future, you imagine. So, I mean, right now.
By the way, when you said Chinese and nuclear, you remind me, I screwed up earlier. It wasn't Eisenhower. It was Truman who decided not to attack the Soviet Union before they got atom bombs.
Oh, yes.
I don't know what I was thinking.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
Everybody misspeaks. But yeah, the amount of energy that AI takes is insane. And like right now, like X has got, or Tesla has all of the information that all your Tesla cars report back to X and give them their telemetry and give them their experiences. So they use that to model AI. And that the Optimus robot is going to need significant AI in order to train it. And if Musk is right, he's talking about 10 million Optimus robots, I think, by 2030 out in the world. Now, it takes a lot of compute to train them, but once you train one robot, that's training all of them because it's just a download after that. So I saw an interview of Musk today. He was talking. He's like, look, all you do is you train a robot like you train kids. Basically, you let put an Optimus in a room and you give it toys to play with, like literally like the squares to put through the square hole and the star to put through the star hole, and that's how you train it to be able to function in the real world. And nowadays, because nowadays the way they train it is they have people put on a suit and a mask that can see, and they'll do, you know, activities, whatever it is. That's why you see the Optimus robots that can dance. They're pre-programmed to dance like that. So there's someone that actually did that dance. They motion capture, and then they just transferred that to the Optimus, and it can do it. But to have an autonomous robot that they can actually sell as basically you know, a servant inside your house, it has to be able to, you know, has to be able to manage your house, not just the house that they saw, but it has to be able to manage a house that it's never been in, get into the house, learn the house, and go up and down the stairs or whatever.
Rosie the robot.
Exactly. And that's the thing that Musk is talking about. And that takes a lot of compute power.
Yeah.
And right now, the U.S. just doesn't have the kind of energy production necessary. China does, or China's at least making serious attempts to do it. But even something... It's crazy.
The thing is, like, if I say to you, okay, man, we're going to repeal all the regulations that are preventing this from happening right now. Well, which regulations? Because I'd be the first to bet that probably 80% of them are stupid and redundant and irrelevant and hamstring proper efforts. On the other hand, if they're going to get rid of them, I guess I'd be willing to bet 80% that they would get rid of the wrong ones, the ones that actually keep Mr. Burns from irradiating us all.
Well,
so
I mean, that means you just have to get rid of all of them.
yeah. But look, engineers are badass. I don't put it past them. They can do it. If you know, assuming the checks and balances are there to, you know, keep everything inspected and safe, then I say go for it. We were talking about a little bit before we went on about how, I don't know a lot about this, but I've heard tell over the years from different sources and read a little bit here and there about how at least claims that for all of the nuclear waste in the country right now, it could all be refined further and further and further in various steps to the point where it's completely inert and harmless. And we get all that energy out of it, and we're left with no dangerous waste at all. And the first time I heard about this and the second time I heard about this, they both said the same thing. Jimmy Carter ruined it because he signed all these executive orders saying you're not allowed to transport the stuff around. But there's only 1 or 2 facilities that can handle this process.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to move anything from here to there and this kind of thing. But of course, you could just build more of those reactors. I'm sure there's more regulations preventing those kinds of reactors from being built too.
There haven't been a new reactor.
This could be done right, apparently.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's
I mean,
the
look,
point.
if you look at like Germany and France, right? Germany decided not to build nuclear reactors. France decided that they were going to be building nuclear reactors. Germany ended up buying LP and energy production from Russia after they were sanctioned.
Texas.
In Texas, probably Texas, yeah, I imagine so. But France, and they still had energy problems. They still had rolling blackouts, if I understand correctly. France doesn't, because they have the ability to generate electricity, because they decided to use nuclear. And there hasn't been, a problem in France when it comes to nuclear energy.
Hey, can I ask a question for the chat room? I bet you there's some engineers in there and stuff. I had read years ago about someone was just ridiculing the idea that we use nuclear to heat water to make steam and turn a piston. Are you kidding me?
High-tech
no
steam
way.
engines.
Yeah, what this guy said was you could get rid of all those steps and go from nuclear straight to electricity. The physics are there. If you know what you're doing, they could have done it years ago. They could do it now. I wonder if that's nonsense.
All right,
or
chat.
I don't have a good footnote
you
for
hear
that, but I read about it.
Is there anybody in chat that knows?
Does anybody know? Is that a thing?
That can you?
Because what about that? If you just go from nuclear straight, forget heat, and just go straight to electricity.
You just change nuclear fuel into electricity without the steam engine part. What do you guys know? So
it does seem silly, doesn't it? Splitting atoms to generate steam.
Yeah,
like it's still the 19th century. There's got to be a better way, man.
200-year-old technology, but you're just using a high-tech firecracker. But on the topic of AI, this right here, just so people get a sense, this is AI. Check this out.
So I went to the zoo the other day, and all they had was one dog. It was a Shih Tzu.
I mean, obviously, it's terrible.
So I went to
joke.
the zoo the other day, and all they had was one dog. It was a Shih Tzu.
Rightly, but these are these are.
I want
AI.
no bullshit. You stay on my 6 at all times.
they shoot the guns in this, they're not touching the trigger.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are still tells. You know, that, like 20 gigantic dudes getting out of that little van is kind of.
The guy is just looking straight at the camera.
Yeah, you know.
It is getting
What
better.
the hell happened here?
Yeah, I mean,
Where are the bodies?
It's pretty amazing.
Party board. I'll be interested when they make a rom-com.
How long do you think it'll be before you just can't believe anything you see anymore?
That's already happened to me.
at this point, next year.
Yeah. Right?
We already see what we want anyway. We don't need fake pictures for that.
Well, yeah.
I'm seeing a bunch of fake Theo Von podcast clips where he's
Really?
interviewing Mark Zuckerberg and he's just saying the craze. And I'm like, half believing it happened because Theo Von just takes conversations in crazy directions sometimes. All of them were AI generated and I was totally fooled. So I don't trust anything anymore.
I did an AI version of my voice because I thought I would try to cheat and do the audiobook of this without trying. And there's no way. I listened to it, like it read back one paragraph. And it's terrible because, of course, it doesn't understand anything. It doesn't know what it's talking about. So it has no idea how any inflection should be, how any enunciation should be at all. It's just reading words. It'll call, you know, tear, because it can't understand the context clue in the middle of the word of how to say it. And so the idea of doing an audiobook like that, forget it. It'd be complete disaster.
For now.
Yeah, I guess for now. But I think, no, I'm not so sure about that. I think this is what it all comes down to, right? Is that it's only, like, to me, almost a magical belief that at some point these algorithms will be sophisticated enough that it's essentially mimics or is even smarter than humans.
I think so.
Like, truly more intelligent than humans. I don't buy it because
and you are there.
you know what
safe
what
with
they
him
do
in
is
an
they
SUV.
approximate
Yep.
what someone would say to you if they were talking to you. It's just a chat bot, basically, right? And so if you look at, I mean, I deal with Grok and with OpenAI, whatever it's called, the Chat GPT 4 thing, and they suck. They're terrible. They make up lies all the time. I'll ask them, hey, man, what was the thing that they tortured out of Abu Zubaydah again about the thing? And then it'll tell me, oh, yeah, it's on page 43, and it says this quote, and it's completely made up. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world. They do it all the time.
They do.
And so, yeah, I just don't put too much stock in it.
So
they can have data, but they can't have knowledge. They can't really think or understand what something means in a way that a person can, right?
What's up? I already showed them that. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, but we'll, so I wanted Scott to check out this one, though. But, like, look at this, right?
I mean, man, the acceleration is crazy. You look far, step on the pedal, and you are there.
I feel safe with him in an SUV, and it seems to be like the right type of car for him.
I think the range is only going to get better. Sorry.
We don't want to drive gas cars anymore.
Yeah,
This is
no
all
more
fake.
gas
This is all fake.
100%, huh?
See, I'm kind of a misfit here, but don't tell anyone. I've just bought an electric car.
I think it's really great for families and for little babies with all
I
the
mean, if
safety
you know
features
that's
that
what
these
you're
SUVs
looking at,
have.
or maybe
But
what you're
you're
looking
really
for.
seeing is that
But
technology
otherwise,
is
I
gonna
could be
very,
fooled by
very
that.
important
Oh, I could
in
be
terms
fooled.
of
Yeah,
how
like
we
if
go
I
forward.
didn't know, if I went on the hunt for AI and I was just, you were just showing me a video of some people talking, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, well, that's the
That's
thing.
enough to get me right there, I think.
Bro, I think that's like, I feel like that's generational because it doesn't get me at all.
I agree, and that's why you got to watch out for these Facebook scams where they're like really obvious AI generated images being used to scam a bunch of grandparents out of their money, showing like injured children or people with disabilities or like veterans, random heart, like just things that tug at old people's heartstrings, and then they end up in some kind of they get funneled into a conversation with like an Indian scammer or whatever. It ends up wire transferring all of their money. And that's a generational thing. They just don't have the same ability to differentiate, but eventually we're all going to feel like Facebook boomers, aren't we?
I think that, yes, I think we absolutely everybody will.
I'm going to get scammed.
But back to the story that set this all off. I think that most people should be, should have a positive opinion on nuclear energy. I mean, there's been nuclear power generated all over the world in many, many countries for 40, 50 years. And you can think of 3 accidents and only one of them was really bad.
Yeah.
And only one of them was because of human error. And I mean, 3 Mile Island was an accident, but that didn't turn into a catastrophe. Obviously, Chernobyl was a catastrophe, but a lot of the reason why Chernobyl was a catastrophe was because it was a communist country.
Yeah. And it was a government official.
Yes.
My friend Gordon Prather used to make nuclear bombs or test them. Real expert on all this stuff. And he talked about, I'm almost certain this is where I got this from. Yeah. That what happened was the inspector came and some alarm was going off. And he's like, turn off that alarm. And then they just like, oh, I guess we better do what he says, guys. And so like, and I guess what it was they didn't just turn off the alarm. They turned off the thing that was causing the alarm to go off. But then by doing that, it said about this chain reaction. And so like, if the inspector had just stayed home that day, the guys running the plant were doing fine. You know, they would have been fine.
And then there's Fukushima, which, a 9.0 earthquake in Japan is what caused the tsunami. And it wasn't even the earthquake, as we were talking about earlier. It wasn't even the earthquake that caused the problem. It was the tsunami that caused the issue.
And how bad is it now? Do you know?
There is still some kind of exclusion zone, but remember when it happened, everyone was like, oh, it's going to irradiate the whole Pacific Ocean, and everyone's talking about there's going to be 2-headed fish in the Pacific and, coming to California and blah, blah, blah. None of that happened.
Yeah.
I think that the concerns about nuclear radiation are very overblown. And this is something we were talking about earlier, too, is like, it was my sense for a long time that nuclear waste was some kind of liquid.
Neon green sludge.
From the Simpsons.
It was because, it's the Simpsons or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but it's not that. I've learned recently, actually, that it's literally metal bars that are, encased in concrete, and there's never been encased in concrete and then encased in a steel, cylinder. There's never been one of those steel cylinders that broke ever. There was a truck transporting them one time, and they got into an accident, and they got knocked off the truck, and they were perfectly fine and intact because it's literally just a steel cylinder with concrete inside of it. And even if it broke open, it's not like it spills out everywhere. Right. It's like, yes, there's radiation and you don't want to go near them, but you could literally have a truck pick it up and put it into a container, and it's not right. It's not the way that most people kind of into it that it is. And so this kind of the kind of fear of nuclear power and
especially in this day and age, we ought to be able to not even have that waste to deal with. We ought to be able to figure out how to use all that waste until it's gone.
Yeah. So, all right, we're gonna hit one more story, which is an absolute horrible way to end the show, especially because someone I knew happened to pass away.
That dude.
The AP is reporting a music talent agency says 3 employees died on a plane that crashed into a San Diego neighborhood. The music agency Sound Talent Group said Thursday that 3 of its employees, including co-founder Dave Shapiro, died on the private plane that crashed into a San Diego neighborhood. Shapiro is listed as the owner of the plane and has a pilot's license according to the Federal Aviation Administration. Shapiro also owned a flight school called Velocity Aviation and a record label, Velocity Records, according to his LinkedIn page. The agency didn't share the names of the other 2 employees who died. We're devastated by the loss of our co-founder, colleagues, and friends. Our hearts go out to their families and everyone impacted by today's tragedy, the agency said in a statement. Sound Talent Group has represented artists including Hanson, Sum 41, and Vanessa Carlton. San Diego authorities said 2 people had died. The total number of fatalities is unknown, but 6 people were on board the plane, according to the Federal Aviation Administration. The private jet crashed early Thursday into a neighborhood of U.S. Navy-owned housing in San Diego during foggy weather, igniting at least 1 home and numerous vehicles parked on the street. The plane clipped power lines before slamming into the house, said Elliot Simpson with the National Transportation Safety Board. And the person that passed away that I knew was the drummer of The Devil Wears Prada. All That Remains toured with these guys and have done a bunch of shows with them. He wasn't currently in the band, but he was in the band when we toured with them. So I didn't know him super well. We weren't like going to each other's houses on holidays and stuff, but I knew him. So it's always a weird kind of thing when it's like, oh, someone that I knew is not only passed away, but they're in the news. You know, it was like a
Feels weirdly impersonal.
yeah, you know. So the Daily Mail says a famous drummer has died in a private jet crash that killed at least 2 people hours after he shared a photo of himself at the controls. Dan Williams, formerly of hugely popular Christian metalcore band The Devil Wears Prada, filmed himself boarding the Cessna 550 at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey late Wednesday night. The drummer, 39, also shared pictures of him at the controls of the small aircraft and said he was the co-pilot now. It's unclear if he was joking. An eerie final post showed him at the plane's control with the caption, "Here we go." The plane tail number of N666DS took off from the Teterboro Airport on Wednesday at 11:15, tracking data reveals. It stopped for fuel in Wichita, Kansas, before continuing on to California, where the Cessna ultimately crashed in a quiet military neighborhood in San Diego, close to its intended final destination of Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport. So, yeah. You know, there's been a lot of people that are talking about the frequency of air accidents, and I still don't think that there's actually a significant uptick in air accidents, especially when you're dealing with, you know, small Cessnas and stuff like that, or small planes like private jets like that, like this one. They have a fairly bad safety record, especially, at least when you compare them to you know, the large carriers, because the large carriers have, you know, they have all the incentive in the world to not crash. Whereas if you're a private jet, especially one that it sounds like Shapiro, I think is his name Shapiro? Yeah, Shapiro owned the jet, and it sounded like he was the pilot too. Especially if Dan was in the co-pilot seat, you know, he was probably hanging with his friend. But yeah, you know, if it's a recreational pilot or someone that can pilot but they don't pilot the way that the large carriers do, you know, you're definitely more prone to accidents. So
I got to watching this guy pilot debrief on YouTube. He's a former F-15 pilot and also private pilot. And whenever there's an accident, he goes through and he always talks about, like, the way he always puts it is the holes in the Swiss cheese line up. And once you have 3 errors in a row, dead.
Yeah.
You know, this kind of thing. And then you just have, and he goes through and he shows it's almost always this careless mistake. Sometimes, you know, it's a mechanical problem, but it could have been handled if you had followed the checklist or whatever. You know what I mean? And, like, it's pretty scary, man.
Especially, like, this is
I would love to be a pilot, but I just don't want to take that slam. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, this is a pretty long flight too, from Jersey to California. You know, it's a pretty capable jet to do that flight, you know. But yeah, it's
sucks, man. Sorry about your buddy.
He left the band quite a while ago.
Yeah.
He was on their best work.
Yeah. So we toured with them in, like, well, I mean, we played a bunch of shows with them throughout the years, but we played. I remember we did a tour with them in, like, 2010, and so that was when we met and stuff. So, but yeah, it's weird. So, is it time for super chats yet? Yeah. All right, we're gonna go to super chats. So smash the like button, share the show with your friends, and join us in the Discord by going to timcast.com, and then you should also join us on Rumble. Become a member, so that way you can join us for the after show, where we will take your phone calls and we will allow you to interact with our guest and with us. And if you got questions, you can go ahead and hit us up. So, but right now we're going to go ahead and start taking some of these super chats. So let's see. Shane H. Wilder says, "What a day. The big, beautiful bill passes through the House with tax breaks and budget cuts like defunding Planned Parenthood. And now the FTC is investigating Media Matters for collusion. Let's go." Amen. I second that. I do want to say,
how big are those cuts?
They're not big enough. The big, beautiful bill is not big. It doesn't cut enough. There is a little silver lining on the bill, though. The Hearing Protection Act was in the bill, and that passed the House, and the Short Act was not. So hopefully we can get the Short Act added in the Senate. Fingers crossed. So call your representatives, call your senators, tell them that you want to see the Short Act added, and yeah.
Hey, can I say a thing real quick?
Go
You
ahead.
just reminded me. Man, I almost forgot. In Arizona, the Republicans passed unanimously through the Senate the Defend the Guard Act.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And get this, for anyone out there who leans left anymore, I don't know how anyone could, but if anyone does out there, not one Democrat supported it. They got it through. I mean, imagine that. An anti-war bill. And what this does for people not familiar is so important. This is the most important thing going on in the anti-war movement in America today. It's led by combat veterans from Iraq War II and Afghanistan. Bring our troops home.us, defendtheguard.us. And the move is to get the state legislatures to pass laws and the governors to sign laws making it illegal for the governor to give the soldiers over to the president to use for combat in a foreign operation without an official declaration of war by the Congress, like it says in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, and which, of course, has been a real problem that we haven't declared war since against Romania in 1942. And it's conservatives and libertarians and American combat veterans from the terror wars who are behind this effort and are pushing it through. And they did have the House in Arizona all lined up, but the leadership of the House in Arizona is now botching it and falling apart. So it's kind of an emergency. But what we do is we got this great phone banking program there at defendtheguard.us. And I'm 99% sure it's just defendtheguard.us/phone bank. And then what happens is once you go there, you sign up, and then Diego Rivera, who's a ranger from Iraq War II and a great guy, he will contact you, train you up, teach you how to do it, and it really works. I mean, forget the U.S. Congress in Washington, but your state legislature, if they get a bunch of calls from veterans talking about you better support veterans by supporting this bill, they will support it. And we've had a lot of successes. We haven't gotten it signed yet, but we've got it through many state House and state Senate committees, and we've got it through full state Houses and full state Senates numerous times over the last few years here. So it's crucial. So anyone, especially America First, anti-war right-wingers and libertarians, we need you. Go to defendtheguard.us/phone bank and give them hell there in Arizona and help get this thing through the House.
There you go.
Can I get one word on the one big beautiful bill?
Sure.
Trump supporters should be very excited about this bill because it's one big beautiful bill, and we won't need to wait for a ton of different bills to pass the House. And the MAGA agenda is finally getting through, and we should be excited about it. But we should also remember the libertarian grandstanders in the House who didn't help get this passed and are acting like a Trojan horse for the left. People like Thomas Massey, where Donald Trump again called this guy a grandstander. So we should keep in mind who's against the MAGA agenda while saying they're in the Republican Party. So worth mentioning.
Listen to a lot.
Is that what Massey's doing? He wants spending to be higher? Is that his thing?
Yeah,
he's voting against the MAGA agenda. That's what he's doing.
Well,
I'm not familiar. What was with the Thomas Massey situation?
He voted against the one big beautiful bill in the House, and it would be cool if we could actually pull up Donald Trump.
But
speaking
why?
Because it doesn't cut.
Because he's so principled, or as Donald Trump says, he just doesn't understand how the government.
Actual reason?
Because he's so principled.
Because it doesn't cut anything, right? So the Republicans have control of the House and Senate, and they have the opportunity, the chance to actually make substantive cuts. But there are no cuts. There are not even decreases in spending. It's only increases. And so
libertarians don't ever have to seriously govern. They get to grandstand. And
I thought Thomas Massey wasn't even a libertarian.
Well, that's how he dubs himself.
Well, he is, but it sounds like he's doing the right thing to me.
He's opposing the MAGA agenda in the House.
Is he a libertarian?
He's a member of the Freedom Caucus. I'm not sure if he would call himself a libertarian. Okay. He is a Republican member of Congress. So he caucuses with the Republicans. He runs as a Republican. So technically he's going to be called a Republican, but he does agree with libertarians when it comes to spending, because look, conservatives and Republicans historically have used the lip service of I'm a conservative. That means I want smaller government, I want less spending. That's the way that they present their ideas. Historically, in reality, Republicans have been just as big spending as as Democrats. Donald Trump has a lot of things that he wants to do. They cost money, and the fiscal conservatives are like, hey, this doesn't cut the government. And whether or not you agree with the agenda that Donald Trump has or not, the fact of the matter is, just yesterday, the bond market responded to the passing of the bill because essentially what the bond market is saying is like, we don't believe that the government is going to get this spending under control, because when you have Republicans in control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they don't make cuts, whether or not you like this is true.
I know, but
the bond market response. This is how the
don't
bond.
let the perfect be the enemy of the good. When
it doesn't
you get
matter.
To the
It
House
doesn't.
and
It doesn't.
actually have
Listen,
to govern.
I'm
Thomas
telling you the
Massey
truth.
is able to posture.
I'm telling the facts of what happened. I'm not telling
No,
opinions.
but you're really missing the forest for the trees.
No, I'm not. I'm not articulating your opinion. Is what's going on. The bond market responded because this bill passed, because there was no cuts. Ostensibly, if you make tax cuts and you can get the economy growing, then that will offset the spending, right? Because you'll have more economic activity, and so you'll have more money coming in to take care of the spending. But as of right now, the Republicans haven't cut taxes. They haven't made. I think there might be a tax cut that is in this, but they haven't made any significant cuts. And there haven't been any of the Doge cuts are not in the bill to make them permanent, that's necessary.
Right.
You know, excuse me.
Oh, so it was pointless.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't pointless, but they are not taking this opportunity.
Wasn't there an idea floated to make cuts in order for them to only need a simple majority?
Well, this is a spending bill, so this is a spending bill, and that's why they only need a simple majority. So in the Senate, they only need a simple majority because it's a spending bill. Most of the time, they need 60 votes, which is part of the reason why very rarely do bills get passed, because this is what they call reconciliation. So you have to have a simple majority, and the only things that can be in this bill are things that are related to funding. So there's when I talk about the Hearing Protection Act, that only gets in there because of the fact that there's a tax attached to the sale of suppressors, right? If there wasn't a tax, if it was just, you're not allowed to have these, you have to register them, they wouldn't be able to put it in because it has nothing to do with the budget. This is specifically about budgeting. So anyways, we're going to keep
Thomas Massey. Don't talk down on.
I like him too.
Me too.
Well,
So.
Donald
Best
Trump thinks he's a
congressman we got.
grandstander and says he doesn't understand how government works.
Trump doesn't really think that. He was just firing off.
Yeah, generally I like Donald Trump, but it's okay to disagree with him on some things.
You recognize that right now in the budget, the interest on the national debt is more than the cost of the entire empire per year.
Yeah, it's over $1
So
trillion
for all you people slaving away, paying the IRS your third of your income. Yeah. All that is just going to pay interest to some sovereign national government bondholder on the other side of the planet somewhere. Yep. You're not even getting to help kill a Gazan kid with it. Yep. You're not even getting to, much less buy medicines for some poor sick old lady. Yep. Nope, you're just going to pay interest on the debt to the National Bank of South Korea.
And it's getting to the point where the interest on the national debt, like to your point, it's so much money that the government isn't going to be able to do anything at all except for pay interest on the debt. So anything that the government wants to do, they'll be printing money up for, taking a loan, selling bonds. And when people don't want to buy the bonds because the debt is so high, that makes the bond market react. And yet, like I said, yesterday, they put bonds on sale and the desire for them was very, very soft. There wasn't people running to buy them. There was a downgrade in the U.S. Credit rating by Moody's, or I think it was Moody's, but it was because people don't think the government is going to be able to pay back the bonds. If people won't buy U.S. treasuries, then the government can't just spend money like it wants. So there has to be a demand for the U.S. treasuries, or else you're not going to be able to print up money. So it's a real pickle we're in. It's something that the libertarians have been talking about for decades now. Ron Paul was talking about it in 2008, screaming at the top of his lungs when the first housing crisis. He was like, we can't just print this money. And then we went on to not only do the housing to do the TARP, but then we spent a decade, almost a full decade, at 0% interest rates. It was $0 to borrow money for banks. And so rich people were taking out loans, taking those loans and throwing
all the COVID spending too. That was all brand new money.
But at least that
not even loaned into circulation, but just
pumped
sent
in
straight out by the Treasury. Right?
So I understand your frustration a lot because it's an opportunity to get these policies that Trump wants in, but there's reality is starting to materialize, and it's coming in the form of people don't want to buy U.S. Treasury bonds the way that they used to. The U.S. used to be a guarantee, used to be as guarantee as any guarantee you could find on earth. And when they opened up the bond market yesterday, there was not the demand. They just weren't there. So, that's reality coming to say, hey, this spending is going to stop one way or another. Anyways, so Hard Case says, Phil, I am also having my first child in October and November. I think it may fall to that generation to save humanity. I hope that there is enough of them because we need more people like you and me having kids.
Congratulations, dude. That's awesome.
It's really cool.
So what generation is that? Is it still, it's the one after Alpha, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
Is that Generation Beta?
I hope not.
That'll
I
be
really hope
embarrassing.
not.
Yeah, right? That's terrible. They
Ugh.
come up with a different name.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Generation Based.
Broken Cake 2 has a terrible idea. Give every country a nuke. No, that's an awful idea. That's terrible.
Okay, but just like one or two each, though.
Oh, man. All right, let's see. The Liam McCollum Show says, hey, Scott, tell everyone about... Oh, never mind. It says it. Tell everyone about the Defend the Guard Act, which he already did. So, let's see. MT... No. Let's see. What do you got?
There's a lot of them.
Let me see. Yeah, but they're kind of a lot of them were dependent on the actual conversation that was happening at the time.
I always wish we ran through them. I feel like so many super chats come in, we never get to so many of them.
Okay, here, Jay Dirtbiker says, Phil, I'm still waiting for Aaron Lewis to come make an appearance on the show. Do your thing, man. I would love to get Aaron Lewis on the show, but when you're on tour, it's tough to stop to come make a show like this. So Aaron's a great guy and a friend, but I don't know what he's up to. So let's see. Kit Tanker 420 says, bring back my new favorite show called Phil Tells Elad to Shut It at 8. I've never done that. I've never told Elad to shut it.
Some people don't like hearing the truth.
I mean, we do disagree around here, and that's part of the charm of the show. Not everybody just says, oh yeah, we all agree on the same thing, and it's okay. Let's see. Jonathan Foreman says, I wonder if Jimmy John's is going to get their PR department to ask them never allow their guests to drink from their cups again. Oh, no, I don't think so.
No.
Sponsorship?
Wouldn't that be great if their stock price went way up?
Right?
Or way down? Either way, I think I'd be happy just to know that.
What was this one up here?
Mattered at all.
Holy cow.
S.A. Federale says, holy cow, you have Scott Horton on tonight? Please give all his ideas to literally anyone else to argue and stop him from writhing on the stage like a 2-year-old on Ritalin. Oh, my God. Be nice to our guest.
Writhing. Oh, am I wiggling in my chair back and forth too much?
I think so. Let's see.
Sorry, dude.
Let's see. MT says, oh, they're giving you more hell, Scott. MT says, Scott, we were just on the brink of World War III 2 weeks ago. Why? Because Pakistani Islamic terrorists going after Hindus. Did Israel, America make them do it?
No. I mean, I think the question is whether the ISI made them do it, right? Or whether it was like some freelance bin Ladenites. But yes, I mean, look, there's a great book called Devil's Game by Robert Dreyfuss where he explains how it was really the British policy to support Islamists against the nationalists and the socialists in the post-World War II era. And then America picked it up from them. And so America has built these Islamist networks all across the Middle East. Now, whether, if it was Lashkar-e-Taiba that did that, whether they were originally created in cooperation with the CIA, I guess is doubtful. I think they probably were just created by Pakistani intelligence. And the fight over Kashmir, no, is not driven by America. In fact, my understanding is that Donald Trump intervened and helped to negotiate a peace there, which is what I would like to see America do, is leave the world the hell alone and yet be willing to pick up the phone, be willing to host peace conferences, be willing to help resolve some of these frozen conflicts, as they call them, around the world, and see what kind of compromises can be made. It's a really intractable kind of conflict where you have essentially a Muslim population ruled by a Hindu princeling supported by New Delhi, and the local people there just want independence for themselves, don't really want to be ruled by either side, I don't think. But it's completely,
well, there's a lot of that's a very tribal area as well too.
Yeah,
right? They
the states are very fake in the first place.
Yeah.
You know what? I didn't even know this, dude, until a few years ago. Pakistan is actually something like an acronym or whatever you call it. It's actually made up of it's like the P is for Punjab and the whatever.
Yeah.
And
The K
it's
is
all
for Kashmir, which they don't have. Which
and
is
then
the funniest part.
And ends with Baluchistan, which is there closer to Iran. So there's nothing natural about the creation of that state. It was the British Empire that drew the lines.
Yeah, all of Pakistan, like the whole Pakistan, and I don't think this is the same for India, but the whole of Pakistan and Afghanistan and like Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, they're all, conglomerates of tribal people far more than they are actual countries.
Well, and when it's the British that come through, they like to either divide and conquer like they did with the Pashtuns, the Durand line on the Afghan-Pakistani border. That was drawn there by the British in order to divide the Pashtun tribes, which seems to have worked pretty fantastically. Or in other places, the group opposing ethnicities together in a new nation to keep them divided and conquered and easier to rule. So yes, and this is the curse of the old world, right? Is that everybody wants their nation state to reflect their ethnic borders, but they don't.
Yeah.
And so then do we have to fight about it, or can we find compromises,
All right, let's see here.
Sorry for...
From the Spork, which says, "We're not afraid of what they have to say. It's really very simple. If they hate us, why would we want them here? And why would we educate and help them? We shouldn't. Not a citizen. Get out." I mean,
what
look.
if they just hate our government, which is in our interest? The more people who hate our government, the better, because our government is the worst thing about our society.
Well, I mean, it depends.
Hating us is like, I don't know, who do they hate exactly? These people.
It depends on what you mean. If it's just like someone that's critical of the government, that's fine. But there's a lot of people that really just don't like the United States as a concept. They don't like so the argument they hate us for our freedom when it comes to like overseas, I don't agree with that. But when it comes to the left, they literally do, because leftists don't like the idea of people having dissenting views. And you see that the way that they do the whole cancel culture was for all the teens and stuff.
Yeah.
So let's see. Bueno Malio says, "Mechanical engineer here, used to work for a cogeneration power plant. Power plants are giant inverse motors. Nuclear energy is magic, rock heats water, and spinny fan go burr." So I guess he's saying that he doesn't know of any kind of technology where you can just transfer nuclear material into electricity. So Matthew Perry says, "Who else has Palestine fatigue? I don't care anymore." I think there's a lot of Americans that kind of have that opinion.
Look, I mean, can I just say real quick? Sure. I don't care about the rest of the world at all. Like, I feel like I'm forced into this job. The fact of the matter is, our government's relationship with the rest of the world is the primary factor determining our government's relationship with us. If we didn't have a world empire, we wouldn't really need Washington, D.C. hardly at all. We could get rid of all of this and have much more localized governments and much more freedom.
I think
and look, in fact, our grandparents all moved here in order to be free and leave the old world and its problems behind. The problem is our government is the world empire. The middle part of North America is the dominant force in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, in Eastern Asia. And so they make all this stuff our business, and we can't have our limited republic we want here until we abandon our world empire there.
Like, on principle, I agree with you, but I think the biggest problem with that is the fact that there aren't enough people that are libertarians. Like the argument, like the bumper sticker, libertarians viciously plotting to take over the country and leave you alone, right?
Yeah. You're taking over anything.
No, they're not taking over anything. But the thing is, like, I love the idea, but the fact of the matter is, the libertarian kind of impulse isn't isn't popular enough to actually do that. And in
Well, it
True,
depends.
it's so
No,
true.
Well, it depends.
People
I mean,
grow
if
up
you're-
is the issue with libertarianism.
I mean, if you're
if
talking
you
about
weren't so combative about the conversation, you could actually like
no, that's it.
convince
It's people grow up like they realize that it's actually like hyper individualism. It's not how our society actually functions, and we're a product of our environment and societies and neighborhoods that we grow up in.
That's not contradictory to libertarianism at all.
No,
I mean,
it's
the
not.
fact
Well, I
is,
think it goes a bit deeper than that.
I mean, the
but-
fact is that more and more, for example, right wingers all agree that Ron Paul was right all along, not just about money, but about foreign policy too.
Well, I mean,
we should have never been doing any of this. And you know what? Forget the Cold War and the post-World War II era, but at least since the end of the Cold War, Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul and Ted Carpenter and everybody who said we should come home from Europe, we should come home from Asia, leave the world the hell alone. They were all right. They have all been vindicated.
Yeah.
And the right wingers now, and you know what it was? It was when ISIS took over Western Iraq. And they went, what in the world are we doing
the
now
argument
here?
that the-
What have we won out of any of this
the argument
war
that
for Israel?
we'll go ahead and
What did
and-
Israel even win from our wars for them?
you
the
can
argument-
tie Israel into anything, Scott. It's an amazing.
Well, I mean,
ability
it
you
is
have.
in the Middle East. So
Well, the
All right, listen.
neoconservatives are the vanguard of the Israel lobby in the United States, and they launched that war for Israel. So, yeah, they have a lot to do with it.
All right, we're going
Sure, you
to
can find a way to shoehorn Israel into almost anything.
Yeah, I
We're gonna-
can
listen, we're
shoehorn
gonna-
them
we're
right
gonna-
into my books all
right,
about
listen.
their role in lying us into that war.
All right, we're
sure
gonna
that
we're
gets you a lot of views
enough.
compared to
Okay,
anything
look, enough with the snipping. We got to wrap it up here. Okay, so everybody, smash the like button again. Share the show with your friends. Join us, Timcast.com. Become a member of the Discord and join us on Rumble. We're gonna go to the after show right now. I'm Phil that remains on Twix. Scott, you got anything to shout out?
Yes, man. I wrote this book. It's called Why Everything in the World is Bill Clinton's Fault, and I hate him so much. And you can find it right now. It's #1 in War and Peace at Amazon.com.
Awesome.
But wait, was that actually the subhead?
No.
Okay.
It's
That would have
provoked.
been awesome if that
How
were.
Washington started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine. And it's about Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump, although it wasn't really his fault in his first term, and of course Joe Biden and how they ruined everything.
Absolutely.
All right. Go subscribe to Pop Culture Crisis on YouTube. We go live every Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And we also recently joined Rumble, so I'd like you to follow us there as well. You can send me validation on Instagram at Mary Archived, or you can send me hate on X. That is also Mary Archived.
Mary, it was a fun episode with you tonight. Hey, everybody, I'm Elad Eliyahu, White House correspondent here at Timcast. You can find me on all the social medias at Elad Eliyahu. You could send me DMs of firearm ideas because with this rise of anti-Semitism, I think I might have to start a Jew gun club. So, Serge, you're
19.
invited to if you want. Huh?
Glock 19.
Glock 19? You could take me shooting.
I can take you shooting.
I'd appreciate that.
All right. I am Phil that Remains on Twix. I'm Phil that Remains Official on Instagram. I recently released with my buddy Nick Nocturnal. We released a song. It's called Scarlet. Nick just put out a whole EP. You can check that out on YouTube, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Pandora, Spotify, Deezer, all of them, you know. And stick around. We are going to the after show here where we can say naughty things and talk about topics that are not okay for YouTube. We will see you all tomorrow for the Culture War, and tomorrow evening I'm pretty sure Tim will be back for IRL, so we will see you tomorrow.